Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome today to the special conference, online unfortunately, but we're here today with lots of enthusiasm to talk to you today about incentivizing carbon farming. My name is Michael Wilde. I'm the director at Bionext. Bionext is the umbrella organization for Dutch food and agricultural sector, and I'm delighted to be able to host, to moderate today's session. And it's not just about today's session. Tomorrow we also have 12 wonderful webinars, so we hope you'll all join that too. And the theme carbon farming is obviously amazing to speak about, particularly today, because next week we have the carbon farming initiative being launched by Frans Timmermans himself, and we'll be speaking about that a little bit more in the course of the program. Before we start with the program, maybe a bit of a personal message as to why I'm so incredibly delighted to be part of this fantastic program today. The first reason is that often farmers are seen as part of the problem when it comes to the huge issues like climate, like biodiversity loss, soil degradation, water and health. And it's so good to show how farmers can actually be part of the solution, or maybe I should say solution, when it comes to these themes. The second reason why I'm so delighted is that this is a possibility to work together, so both the organic sector that I represent, but also the conventional agriculture, to work together on climate solutions. And I think it's very important that we have this collaboration between all kinds of forms of agriculture. The third reason is that when you look and you go into more depth about carbon farming, you will see that you're not just to be able to tackle climate with this regard, with carbon farming, but you also work on enriching soils, so you're tackling the soil degradation problems, you're working on clean water, more biodiversity, and even health. So there's so many reasons to get involved with carbon farming, both as a farmer, as a policymaker, but certainly also as a consumer. So without further ado, we're moving to an interview with Marion Krol. Marion, I'm delighted that you're here today. You're our carbon farming expert. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what exactly carbon farming is.
Well, yeah, I assume that a lot of people already know, that our audience knows a lot about carbon farming already, but I can explain a bit more.
I think there's always going to be people who are...
Yeah, exactly. But for everybody, well, carbon farming, in fact, refers to the management of all carbon flows on the farm, with the purpose, as you already mentioned, to mitigate climate change and to slow down global warming. So this is like a definition of carbon farming. But in the project, we focused on carbon removal from the atmosphere and on carbon sequestration in soil and in biomass.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and how this works is that carbon dioxide in the air and water by plants are converted into biomass, and part of this biomass ends up in the soil. But, but soil life and also tillage have an influence on the soil organic matter in the soil, and it releases again into the air partly. So it is in fact a continuous process of carbon binding in the soil and of release again. So what farmers do, if they want to change to carbon farming, they want to make sure that they store as more carbon in the soil than what is released again.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit more about the project itself?
Yeah, but first, so what can farmers do to make sure that they can store more carbon in the soil than what is released again, is that on the one hand, they can grow more biomass. For instance, they can plant cover crops, trees, have more biomass on their fields. And on the second hand, they can reduce emissions by reducing tillage. So that is what farmers do when they do carbon farming. And as you mentioned, this is for climate mitigation, but it also helps healthier soils with more biodiversity, with a better water retaining capacity. So carbon farming is just very good. It has many benefits.
Absolutely. Well, this is fantastic, fantastic stuff. There's a great project going on with carbon farming. I know because BioNext are also a partner in that. Can you tell a bit more about the project itself, the carbon farming project?
Yeah, and how we came to the project, because maybe that's interesting to talk about with you, because the first idea we had already in 2015, when I had a meeting with BioNext, with two of your colleagues, before you were working at BioNext. It was before your time. But we had this meeting because we wanted to work on a project on sustainable soil management. And we discussed that how difficult it is for farmers to change to a sustainable soil management, because the current food system doesn't really support them to change to a sustainable soil management. And then this idea came up of carbon farming and of how farmers can be rewarded for climate services that they can provide to society. So we wanted to experiment in this project, in the carbon farming project, with carbon farming as a new revenue model for sustainable soil management.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can you, what partners are involved?
So then we, like I said, back in 2015, we already started with this idea. We organized an international consortium of 7 partners. And in 2018, we finally succeeded to secure the funding by the Interreg North Sea Region program. And I have a few slides with a bit more information about the project. So, as I said, we are 7 partners in 4 countries. So in the Netherlands, we have ZLTO, the South Netherlands Farmers Organization, and BioNext. In Belgium, we have Boerenbond and Inagro. In Germany, we have the Thune Institute and 3N. And in Norway, we have the Norwegian Land Use Advisory Service. And this is like a perfect mixture to do a project like carbon farming, because we have farmers' organizations, we have advisory services, and we have knowledge institutes. Okay. And our objective was to develop business models to reward for carbon sequestration, so that farmers can start carbon farming.
And since 2018, what have you achieved? What are the results that you're saying?
Well,
what I'm proud of.
Yeah. Well, the results will be shared with, because in a moment we will have 4 initiatives, and they will explain about what they're doing, and they actually represent our results. But I want to refer to this slide too, because it's one of the results. So a very important part of the project is that we defined 4 different business models for carbon sequestration. And the first one, the upper left, is a model within the agri-food chain. So in these models, farmers should be rewarded for carbon sequestration, for carbon farming, by their food products, by a higher price. In the second model, farmers sell carbon credits to companies or institutions with carbon ambitions, with climate ambitions. So they create like a separate revenue stream. And in the third model, this is a very short supply chain. So here the farmers themselves sell their carbon sequestered to their customers. And in the fourth one, it includes governments. So all, EU, national, regional governments. And what we did in the project is we developed different projects or showcases in these 4 different business models.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to move on then, I think, to a short film. Maybe you can introduce what we're going to see now in the...
Yeah, so we are going to see a short film of Virgenes farm in Norway, and that is an example of the short supply chain. So, and afterwards we will have 4 more initiatives in the other business models. Exactly. So, yeah, please have a look and meet Torjardar on his farm in Norway.
In Norway, CSA farmer Tore Jardar communicates on a daily basis with his members about the developments on the farm. This enables him to realize a fair price for the food he produces. He experiences the effects of climate change on his own farm.
My father, he always said that here, where we're standing now, it's a flood every 7, every 8, 9 years. We have now a flood like every 3rd year. That should not happen, but it happens. So we have to change our way of farming.
We are also a part of the problem, of course, with the climate, because we chop too much and we fly. We also try to be solving the problem, try to be part of the solution. And we think that this project with the carbon farming is it's a part of the solution. And of course, it's the best food. It's very healthy food and it's very good. It's the best eggs in the world. We love the eggs.
A rotational grazing scheme with permanent grassland creates more root biomass and therefore enriches the soil with additional carbon.
Carbon farming can be done on cropping, we can do it on the grassland, we can take the carbon from the air and put it in the soil and then actually be better farmers. It's good for climate, it's good for our soil to hold on water. I want to work with permanent grass. With cows, we need them out here, eat the grass perfectly. So that means that they come in here, eat 1/3, they're walking down 1/3 and 1/3 is standing up again. And when you are on that spot, then you also sending enough down to the soil so the roots is getting bigger. If you just cut, then you have short roots, there's no carbon in there. We just have the cows here for a few hours. Then we have to move to another place. Then the chicken coming in. Then they help the last work out there. And then you have like maximized the root system, because everything is under the soil.
Farm advisor Hege Sundet monitors the effects of the carbon farming practices on the farm. She is happy with the first results.
On this spot, it really looks nice today. It's a darker color and crumble structure, some soil life, so it indicates carbon development. We want more carbon in the soil, the more organic matter.
We need to communicate what we are doing. That is, of course, a part of the whole model of the farm, that we can tell the story and sell the story and educate people, and that's much of the fun about doing this. And people understand it. They know what's going on and they want it like that. They want carbon farming. And you got a lot of feedback, and that just make you going to do much more.
We think Tore does a very good job with this farm, and we are very happy to be here with him and to buy vegetables and things like that here, and to contribute to that solution.
Hey, and welcome back. And Tore, if you're watching, tusen takk for this fantastic video. I think it makes it all very clear what carbon farming is about. But to learn more about this wonderful subject, we have an amazing panel for you today. We have Dr. Robert Gerlach, CEO of the CLIM initiative in German, based in Berlin. He's joining us online. Sehr guten Tag, Herrn Gerlach. On my left here, Joris Wisse, carbon farming from the province of Zeeland, not too far away from the studio here in Antwerp. So welcome, Joris. We have Evelien Lambrecht, business developer at Inagro, the Institute for Research and Advice for Agriculture here in Flanders. Welcome. Yeah. Nice to have you all here. And Johanna Huilenbroek, as co-founder of Claire, CO2 platform here in Belgium. And wonderful that you're here today. Robert, hopefully you can see us and hear us.
I can.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Welcome. I think you have prepared a short presentation from us, so maybe I can give you the floor and then we can have a chat afterwards.
Fantastic. I'll briefly present what we're doing. Next slide. I hope that works. Yes, so CLIM, we're all about scaling up the adoption of regenerative agricultural practices as fast as possible. And in order to do that, we first identified the main needs for farmers. And those are, they need financial support, they need access to knowledge, and they need recognition from the consumer. Next slide. So what we did is we developed a combined approach where we offer farmers a digital companion, which helps them to transition to regenerative agriculture. And we developed a consumer label, which helps consumers to support those farmers. Next slide. The digital companion allows the farmers to access knowledge on individual regenerative methods. They can document what they're doing and get verified. And they can also access a community of like-minded farmers and exchange ideas about regenerative agriculture with those. Next slide. The CLIM label can be used for any food product, and we essentially quantify the carbon footprint of the food, and in proportion, farmers get reimbursed with financial support to adopt regenerative agricultural practices. The food label comes with a QR code, and consumers can see which farmers are being supported. Next slide. We help farmers to adopt a broad range of regenerative methods. And the good thing is that they range from simple methods such as cover crops or catch crops to more complex ones, for example, the application of hedges. And we continually increase the amount of methods we are supporting farmers with. Next slide. We verify that the farmers are actually using those methods with our digital companion, with our app, where the farmer uploads pictures taken at various growth stages during the application of those individual regenerative methods, which allows us to actually learn also what the farmers learned during the application. So farmers also give us insights into what went well, what didn't go well, and this helps all other farmers involved. Next slide. We receive great feedback from the farmers. They're very happy with the app, with the digital companion that makes it easy for them to adopt those practices. The verification is super easy. The community is really appreciated. And what they really like is the positioning with the consumer, because that addresses one of the major needs. Next slide. Our consumer label is receiving great traction. We can show that we have managed to communicate the amazing nature of regenerative agriculture to the consumer effectively. We have an engagement rate on our channels that's 9 times higher than the food industry average. And so each label partner that joins CLIM profits from this high engagement of customers. Next slide. And that's seen an increasing amount of label partners. We're always winning new ones, and the label partners are reporting very high satisfaction. So they say they're winning new customers. Customers love the value proposition of good for the climate, fair to the farmer. And that is all great feedback for us and especially our farmers. Next slide. So far, we have over 850 farmers using our app. We have 7 partners secured. The average size of our farm is typically around 60 hectares, pretty much the average of the German farm. And we have currently 4,000 hectares where we are funding farmers for. Thank you.
Fantastic. What a great initiative. And I love the connection with the consumer in this project. Can you tell us a little bit more how the carbon farming project helped you develop this?
Immensely. So I met the people from the Thünen Institute already in 2019, and we originally started by simply asking them for advice, and they were very cooperative and helped us also select which regenerative methods are useful, helped us develop the sort of scalable approach, and then the cooperation intensified. So we attended a number of workshops with them. We labeled the oat flakes that Thünen Institute developed with the Interreg project, and we even did a little publication together. And it's just super important, the cooperation between academia and industry. Even though it's not a proper partnership in the direct sense, it's just super important because we can help. It helps industry to actually do the right thing, because we all want to make sure that no one comes up with crazy sequestration numbers and creates an inflated expectation of what can be done. And for that reason, it's super, super cool.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. It's very inspirational. I'm sure you also faced some challenges. Can you share some of the challenges that you faced where perhaps we can learn from in the future?
I think the biggest challenge we faced initially was most people we talked to didn't really know about regenerative agriculture. They thought it's some form of esoteric stuff and didn't believe in it. That changed now. So fortunately now awareness for this form of agriculture rose. That was certainly a challenge, convincing partners. And another challenge we are facing, we are really promoting a scalable approach, unbureaucratic, to scale up regenerative agriculture as fast as possible. And of course, some might not like that high scalable and unbureaucratic approach. So that's obviously a challenge any organization that wants to create impact fast will face.
Okay, fantastic. Well, vielen Dank for your time. We have a busy schedule. I have tons of more questions, but I need to move on, Robert. So thank you very much for your time. To my left, live in the studio here, we have Joris Wisse. Welcome. We're both Dutch, but we'll speak English.
Yeah, thank you.
I think you've also got a short presentation or a few slides planned.
Yes, yeah.
Let's move to those about Windpark Kramer. I give you the floor, Joris.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to tell you something about Windpark de Kramer. I'm Joris Wisse. I'm one of the carbon farmers, and I'm situated in the southwest of the Netherlands, and the wind park is in my backyard. Our project contains 15 farmers. We have 600 hectare, what includes the project, and we store 2,750 tons of carbon CO2 in 5 years' time. And there is a way of paying us in a hybrid way. So we get paid every year 70% of €100 for 1 ton CO2. And at the end of the project, after 5 years, then the last 30% will be paid on our result. So at the end we have to give some results. The ZLTO helps us by that and developed a way of measuring the CO2 in the soil. And it comes from research done by University of Wageningen. So they figured out how to measure that at the end. We have different techniques to store CO2 in the soil. So we can choose as a farmer what we want and what suits the best for our farm. So in that way, it's a nice project. So you can choose what fits you the best. And in the end, ZLTO helps us then with making the reports and at the end proving that we did what we told. That's the project that we have. In my case, that means that I do that on 35 hectare, and I store 40 tons of CO2 every year in the soil. And I chose for some measurements like planting a diverse windscreen. So then I have also the benefit that my wild bees have flowers all year long. So then I combine some things together. Also better biodiversity on my farm is important to get some natural predators in the future. So that is also an advantage of this project, that you can combine more positive things. I use methods that I leave the straw after harvesting the wheat, and I grow some cover crops in the end. And also I use less tilling the soil measurements. And that is what I do on my farm. The project gets a lot of attention, so that's very nice, and it's also really a win-win situation, as we call that in the Netherlands. And that's also, I think, thanks to Zeewind and Delta Wind, that we are the first project in the Netherlands who are get paid for storing CO2 in the soil. And
fantastic.
And that gets a lot of attention. So it's a hot topic at the moment.
And it makes you proud.
And yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
And the knowledge that we get from this, we can use to tell other farmers, because it's a pilot, so not everything is known, of course, but the knowledge part is very important for me, that I can be a farmer in the future, that I can adjust also my way of farming to what my surrounding expects me to do, and the law tells me what to do, and I can, at the end, tell a positive story to my surrounding. That's very important for me, that it's not always that we as farmers have some negative influence on the climate, but now we have some positive influence on the climate, and that's very important to tell that also to your surrounding.
Gives you purpose, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit about your farm? How you organize it, what you grow, what you do?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I grow on 18 hectares, I grow apples and pears. And next to that, I have also some arable crops. And yeah, in the end, I grow also new apple varieties where we use less chemicals to have a good variety, also what the customers likes. It's a really nice new apple, what I grow on my farm. And yeah, we use already a lot of methods to use different predators from nature to get less plagues on my farm. So integrated crop management is already for a long time on my farm. My father started with that already 20 years ago. So it's nice to be in the front line and to adjust my farm also on that part.
Okay, and just a specific, we're back to you as a carbon farmer. Which, nice. What are you doing differently now as opposed to in the past?
Okay, that's a good question. I leave my straw on the field, so I don't sell my straw at the end. So now I leave it on the field, and I grow more cover crops, what I did not do in the past. And I planted now for the first time the diverse windscreen with all types of flowers and trees. So that are really different things. And I use more compost on my farm than I did before. And that has the benefit that I increase my soil life. I can store more water in the soil. And at the end, I store also CO2. So that is what I do more than I did before. So I think that's because of the project.
Fantastic. A win-win-win-win.
Yeah.
As we like to say.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Joris.
Okay.
Moving on to Evelien. Welcome again. You're going to tell us a little bit more about your wonderful project. So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So we are guiding the municipality of Biernem in a carbon farming project. So Biernem is a municipality which is located in the province of West Flanders, and they have a lot of own ground, which they usually rent to farmers for a fixed period, I think period of 7 years. But for the plots that are becoming available now, they decided to start up a pilot project on carbon farming. And why did they do that? Well, Biernem is a farmers' municipality, and they really believe that farmers can be part of the solution in the climate problem. They approach them in a positive way. And they support research and innovation, and in that sense we are also used to collaborate with Biernem from the past. Besides, they also signed the Covenant of Mayors, in which they agreed to reduce their emissions, the emissions of the municipality, with 40% by 2030. So by applying the carbon farming techniques, they can contribute to this as well. So as said, the plots are becoming available on a yearly basis. And we are now in the 3rd year, and we have some 12 hectares that are about 12 hectares on which carbon farming techniques are applied. So it's a pilot project in which we from Inagro, together with Boeren Natuur Vlaanderen, we help the municipality to select the farmers, to select the most suitable techniques, taking into account the region, the situation of the plot. We also help them to control if the farmers apply the techniques as they tell, as they communicate. So it's more, that's what we do. What else? On a yearly basis, we organize a call to find new farmers that are interested to participate in the project, to apply those techniques. But besides, they should also be willing to communicate about their experience, to share their experiences, and they should be an ambassador of carbon farming. And in return, then they can use the land for free.
Okay, so that's a big step. Yeah.
Yeah. So for now it's the 3rd year, and taking into account the area and the techniques that are applied, there is about 22 tons of CO2 stored in the soil, and this equals the emissions of about 10 cars. This 22 tons, this is calculated based on tables that we compile together with, well, it's a specific table that we compiled within Flanders in collaboration with different parties, including the governmental institutions. And so it's based on estimations and on findings in literature that we can say that about 22 tons is stored on the area. So it's an effort-based engagement. Yeah.
Fantastic, and I think it's a wonderful initiative. Would this be possible to roll out to other municipalities or other government, like provinces, etc.? How do you see that?
Yeah, we see a lot of interest from other municipalities. Of course, situations are different, and not every municipality owns ground, and we see that it takes more time for the ones that do not, because they have to agree on which compensation fee they have to. On the compensation fee, they also have to find the fundings. They have to agree with the full board of aldermen. But yeah, we are guiding a couple of municipalities in this process, and we are now starting with sensitizing and organizing some information days for the farmers already. And also on we are also setting up a subsidy regulation for other governmental institutions. So there is possibility to.
At the moment, these farms are being supported. How do you see that happening in the future? Is it something that would work on another way, or would you always need governmental support in this?
But for the municipality in Biernaam now, they can use the land for free, but for future we are thinking about reducing the rental fee or giving a compensation fee. So that's how they think to organize it in the future.
Okay, so it becomes more future-proof.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, again, lots of more questions that I have, but we'll talk behind the screen. We're moving on to Joanna, your neighbor on your left. Welcome again. You're going to tell us something about the Claire platform.
Yeah.
So the floor is yours.
Yes, I'm Joanna from Claire, meaning clean air. Yeah. And we're going for being climate neutral in a local way. So I know a lot of you are into carbon farming, but I'll talk to the audience as though they are an entrepreneur, because the platform has two sides. I'll tell you later. So what is it all about? Just imagine that you're an entrepreneur and you want to compensate your emissions, your carbon emissions, via the youth organization around the corner, supporting it, installing its solar panels, or, for example, planting its forest. Or just imagine you're an entrepreneur and you want to compensate supporting the farmer around the corner, using its land, working on its land in a carbon farming way. So that's the whole idea of Claire. Claire is a two-sided platform. So yeah, we're a digital platform. Right now, the platform isn't live yet, but next week it will. So quite an important moment.
Yeah, good timing together with the initiative.
For us. So 1 ton of carbon costs 50 euros a ton. But as we want to be in the future a free marketplace, we want the price setting can be free, and projects can set their price according to, for example, there isn't only the tons they are selling, but there are in fact 2 components they are offering. They are also offering CSR content or marketing, innovative storytelling, let's say. So we see that as well as a leverage for pricing. So like I said, two-sided platform, and maybe I can use this as well. So on the one hand, you have the offsetting company, and it is the offsetting company that can choose via a set of parameters via which project it wants to do its offsetting. And carbon farming is one category, but we have different categories. And that's, I think, really an important part of our story, because we have carbon farming, but we also have nature, we also have technology, energy, because it's important. We come to reduce emissions, and then offsetting is a part of fastening this reduction. So when we do have a match, the offsetter and the project supplier, then we offer a certificate which demonstrates proof of payment realization, and that's a very important one. Our standards, like you say, like you can see, we do have, like I said, 4 types of categories, and there we do have some prototyping. But when there are innovative projects, they can enter as well, because they have to mention which methods, which calculation they have followed, and then we have our scientific advisory board with I think approximately 8 professors, all of them having their own expertise, and covering whether the methods or the calculations are correct. So yeah, that's what's clear about. We're in maybe an important part of the story. Right now we're in the voluntary market, and yeah, the voluntary market is still expanding, let's say. So it's quite a new story to start with. And you asked for some key figures. I think I told what we are doing at the categories. We started last year, and I have to be honest, we had the ambition to offset 3,000 tons this year. Right now, 100 tons. Because, and then maybe I'll tell about some hurdles, the storytelling is really, really important. I think we, me and my colleagues, lots of them are really in the business and in the scientific business, and we think everything is clear for all the people. But that isn't true. I saw you also mentioning tons, and that's so many cars. I saw the picture, so many tickets to New York. Everyone is looking for what is it about those tons, and so that's still something.
It's extremely important that we continue to bring it back to the language that everybody understands. Otherwise, people lose us, and then it's we lose the effectiveness. But can you tell me a bit more about the response that has been from the companies and organizations that you're presenting this to?
So we see there is a lot of interest, and the interest is really growing. and what do they like? The fact that we are offering local projects, because they can go to the project, they can see it, they know what they are contributing to. It's about the connection, it's about the engagement, and the feeling of the entrepreneur of really doing something good for the own neighborhood. That's what really what triggers them. But things are going more slowly than we thought. We need several meetings to come to a match. And we see corporate organizations, so the larger organizations, they have already the mindset, it's coming, this green story, it's coming, we have to prepare. The SMEs, as we call it, they still have a way to go. But you know, when the corporates, or the mindset is there within the corporates, they're going to tell to their SMEs as they are, if you want to deliver services towards my company, you'll need a net zero strategy. What's your net zero strategy? Can you show me that you're doing something? And that's the whole thing that's happening right now. But we'll need those corporates to go to the SMEs to take part in the story as well.
Okay, thank you, Joanne. Marion, I don't know if we have questions in the chat. I would like to give you the floor, and if not, then I have a lot of questions. So
we have a few questions in the chat. One is a question that always comes, and I think we should ask it maybe to Robert, because, Robert, but the question is also for Joris and for Evelyn, and for because it's relevant for all. So how do we make sure that this carbon that has been sequestered in the soil stays there?
That's a good
How
question.
do we ensure permanence? That is the question of permanence. So, Robert, I think for Robert.
Robert, did you get that question?
Yes, so very happy to answer it. Of course, it's super
is he
important.
still there?
Yes. There he is. Hello, Robert. Your sound?
Am I not? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we don't hear Robert.
Oh, wait a second.
We're working.
Hello?
Yeah, wait.
Hello? Can you hear me now?
But maybe while they are fixing Robert's sound, maybe to who? Maybe to Evelyn. You from Inagro, you're a research institute.
Yeah.
So how do we deal with permanence?
But it's a difficult one, of course, and it's like you said, it's a question that always comes back. We expect farmers that when they engage to become a carbon farmer, that they do this also in the future. So if they are convinced of the methodologies of applying carbon farming, of caring for the soil and the environment, that they will be doing it for future as well. So it's a bit,
So you expect farmers to do it permanently? Yeah.
Robert, are we there? Can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so if you can hear me now, I am going to answer the question.
Yes, please.
Okay, so permanence is super important. Of course, we have a range of mechanisms. So one is a financial mechanism. We pay out the farmers only a part of the carbon credit money in the first year, and the remaining part gets paid out only if they have shown that they have either kept the amount of regenerative methods as high as they did or have increased it. That's a financial incentive, but that's not enough. So what we do with CLIM is we have created a range of nudges or incentives in our app, and will continue to add more to make sure that the farmers realize that it's in their own best interest to actually keep up using regenerative methods. Those nudges include, for example, gamification elements where we have social comparisons. Farmers can compare how much they do with other farmers. We know from other industries, for example, the smart home context, that social comparison can be a very effective incentive. Others are related to making sure that the farmer understands the positive and potential opportunity costs that are related to regenerative agriculture. That means we need to show them, if you don't transition, look at what's going to happen regarding your yield and considering the new climatic conditions. Droughts are becoming more frequent. We also need to show them, look, if you transition, you can actually generate all those benefits, reduced need of input, fertilizer, pesticides, herbicides, which will all be having a contribution to your profitability. We also are going to promote role models amongst the farmers, showing, look, it can be done and it can have an effect. That's already been done. There's many famous regenerative farmers around the world that act as role models. And also I believe that being part of this CLIM brand is an additional small incentive, because once you're being portrayed in public as a farmer that actually does something good for the climate, you wouldn't want to get rid of this. No. There's challenges related to that though. You will never be able to completely ensure permanence without any sort of cracks in the system, because the field might be sold in 10 years or 20 years time down the line, and then you cannot really, unless you engage in really long-term contracts, ensure that the future owners will also take the regenerative methods as seriously as not. But I think on average, what we call operational permanence, creating the maximum amount of incentives for farmers to change, is a very good step in the right direction.
Okay, thank you. That's a very clear answer. Maybe there's more questions in the chat, or do we
yeah, there is a very practical question to Claire, to Johanna. Is Claire applicable for more regions? For all regions, it asks. Probably there's an interest from other countries.
Yeah, that's the plan. But let's start in Belgium. We're really going to do it. The local way of thinking is within the boundaries of a country. Yeah. So yeah, let's start in Belgium, and when it works, we can go to other countries as well. But it will always be within their boundaries, because otherwise we're losing the concept.
No, for sure. Yeah, that local aspect is very important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are some more questions, but maybe you had a long list as well.
I also have some questions, but maybe to Joris then. Joris, you're a carbon farmer now, you're getting started. How do you see your business, let's say, in 5 years' time, and what's going to change in the coming years for you, do you think?
I think the most important thing is to adjust on my surroundings. So I see that I can use less chemicals in the future. Mm-hmm. I think that's a fact. I have to deal with that as a farmer. So to adjust to that, I will look for other ways to keep my crop healthy. Mm-hmm. And then a good soil is one of that things that I think will help me in the future. Yeah. So that will be important, adjusting to my surrounding as a farmer, to stay in the future also a farmer. And in the end, my customer is the most important one, because he pays my apples and my pears. And
and with regarding that one, because I think that's a very interesting one, because we need to involve the customer and the consumer in this regard. Do you think you'll be selling your apples in the future from the carbon farmer Joris? Is that aspect going to be part of the sales pitch, perhaps?
Yeah, of course. The next step is, I think, to make sure that you get a good price for your product, and that the consumer knows also what effort it takes to keep that apple in the best way without all the things we use now at the moment.
But maybe also that they should reward you for being a climate hero.
Yeah, so, of course. Yeah, that's also one of the things. Yeah, and in nature it's always difficult, I think, because nature gives us every time new challenges. Yeah. But that would be very nice, that you can keep your head a little bit above the field and get paid for storing CO2 on your farm, and can be also a part of your farm. It's not, of course, that with this only I keep my farm, because then I should not get €100, but then much more. But all things will help me in future to get a better price for my customer.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. I have more questions, but I want to check with you.
There are two questions that I would like to take from the chat. So, first one to Joris: is it possible to do carbon farming in permanent crops, apples and pears? We have been discussing this.
Yes.
So, what can you do when
what we can do and what I use is solid manure and also compost that I put on the soil. Then I get back that I get some natural predators who make their nests, give their young bird in my soil. So increasing my soil gives me also more nature predators on my farm. And that other thing is planting new trees will give also at the end more carbon binding on my farm.
And you mean by planting new trees, you don't mean your apple or pear trees, but you mean the other trees, the windscreen, etc., which are extra, additional. And I think that is the question, what is additional when you are a fruit grower? So, but that's what you explained already. Yeah, good.
Yeah, and also flower parts of my farm that I put flowers on. And in the end, that flower stays also in the soil.
Yeah. And then there is another question, and I think it is more to Robert. How to reward farmers to keep these practices of regenerative agriculture that are, on the end, beneficial to all mankind, as in opposition to go back to intensive agriculture. I think someone is very concerned.
Yeah, so can you still hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. I'm traumatized from the first microphone issue. So I think it's going the same direction of permanence. I think in order to incentivize farmers to keep doing it and not go back, you need to basically tackle a range of challenges. You need to make it easy for them to transition. You need to reward them financially. You need to reward them also in terms of positioning them in public as part of the climate solution. And you need to create incentives to make it much more logical to continue adopting regenerative practices than it is to going back. I mentioned previously already what those incentives can be. Can be financial ones, basically paying out only part of the money in the first year and the rest only after they have kept up the practices, but can also be nudges, comparing them with other farmers, showing them that it makes sense. Because the business case for regenerative agriculture should be obvious. We see increasing regulation in terms of fertilizer and pesticide use that makes it much more difficult for farmers to use as much as they used before. So regenerative is the answer there. We also see massively increasing prices for fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, which make the business case for regenerative agriculture even better. And last but not least, we see increasing demands of the food industry, food companies, to change their supply chains. Many food companies have made commitments to transition their supply chain to regenerative agriculture. All that will create incentives. And I have no doubt that this transition that we kickstart right now is here to stay.
Wow, thanks very much. Do we have room for one more question? I think so.
Yeah, I think you had many on your list. So.
Well, yes. Well, actually, the same question that I asked yours, I'd like to ask Evelien. In 5 years' time, how is this program looking, you think?
Yeah. You mean with other
yes, with other municipalities and other initiatives?
We see really a lot of interest, and if they see inspiration from others, I think a lot will follow. So yeah, maybe the provinces can play a role in their either. So by supporting the municipalities or something, or by creating a framework that municipalities can take part in. I think it could move in that direction, yeah.
And if I have municipalities in Holland who are looking for inspiration, can I send them to you?
Yeah, you can.
Because I think it's a fantastic story.
Yeah, we also had questions from Portugal, etc. So
yeah. Because we see a lot of people are struggling. How are we going to now really we're also contribute in our way towards the climate solution. I think this is a fantastic practical example that other municipalities can put their teeth into. So thank you very much.
Okay.
I think we're going to round off, and I want to thank the panel. Robert, thank you there. Vielen Dank in Germany. Johanna, thank you. Evelien, Joris, thank you very much for joining this discussion. We're now, well, maybe you can introduce the next film.
Well, okay, so we're going to watch a second one of our showcases, and it is the example of your organization.
Bionext.
Bionext, that's why Michael asks me to introduce it, I suppose. But so they, well, you can see it in the film, what Bionext did.
Okay, thanks very much. See you later.
Bionext, the Dutch branch organisation for the organic sector, organises the Biobeurs, a fair for the organic sector. This year they want to make the fair climate neutral.
Samen met de organisator, de logistieke partner, hebben wij gekeken in eerste instantie hoe kunnen we onze CO2 verminderen, onze uitstoot. Daar hebben we bijvoorbeeld ook naar afval gekeken, energieverbruik. Dus niet meer de hallen gaan voorverwarmen, maar pas gaan verwarmen als het echt nodig is. Nou, op die manier ga je je CO2-footprint al verkleinen. De volgende stap is dan dus het compenseren. Dat wilden we heel graag doen met de kringloopgedachte in ons achterhoofd. En ook het carbon farming project wat wij hebben binnen Bionext. De biobeurs stond gepland in Zwolle, provincie Overijssel. En wij zijn hard op zoek geweest om boeren te zoeken in de provincie Overijssel. Om ook aan onze lokale kringloop te gaan denken. Om op die manier onze uitstoot te gaan compenseren.
Harold van Vilsteren is one of the 3 farmers that were part of the project. He is taking several carbon farming measures on his land.
De grasmat zo lang mogelijk intact laten. Dan bouwt hij ook constant organische stof op. Het is langer dan 20 jaar geleden dat dit perceel gescheurd is. Als je gaat scheuren, dan komt er meer zuurstof in de grond en dan wordt de koolstof en de organische stof wordt wat opgebruikt, die komt sneller vrij. En er zijn weinig wortels in de grond en dat heeft weer een paar jaar nodig om weer nieuwe wortelstelsels aan te leggen en weer het boel vast te leggen in de grond. En dat is het nadeel van scheuren. Je organische stof verbrandt je een klein stukje. En als je toch een keer wat moet doen, kun je bijvoorbeeld met vaste mest, stalmest of bokashi waar ik mee werk, compost. Het zijn allemaal producten die je koolstof in de bodem weer verhogen. En wat ook een hele belangrijke is, heb ik nu gezien, is kruidenrijk grasland. Kruidenrijk grasland, waar ik nu volop mee bezig ben voor mijn bedrijf, die slaat veel meer CO2 op. Dan maak je echt een paar slagen vooruit ten opzichte van zeg maar gewoon grasland zonder veel kruiden. Dat zijn de manieren waar ik mee aan de slag ga. Maar het mooiste is, een goede gezonde grasmat, dan heb je het minste te doen.
The farmers signed a contract with Bionext about the carbon farming measures that they are taking.
Op de biobeurs zullen onze boeren die de compensatie voor ons hebben gedaan, hun verhaal gaan vertellen, hun ervaringen delen met alle bezoekers van de beurs. En op die manier willen we carbon farming een bekende fenomeen maken voor iedereen in met name de biologische wereld, maar zeker ook daarbuiten.
Door de voldoende koolstof in de bodem kan je grasmat ook heel lang mee. Kan je een keer een tegenslag hebben. Het bodemleven profiteert van de koolstof, van organische stof, waardoor je die weer stofjes vrijmaakt voor mijn gewassen en daardoor een betere productie handhaaft. Nou ja, daar zijn we al mee bezig. Nou ja, door de biobeurs die hiermee komt, ben je er nog bewuster mee bezig en versterkt het misschien nog wel.
Het is ook goed voor de maatschappij. Wij laten geen enkele footprint achter met onze beurs. En daar zijn we onwijs trots op.
Nou, wat prettig dat je onbewust daar een hele grote bijdrage in kunt leveren.
Welcome back, Thal, and a little wave to my Bionext colleagues who made this beautiful film. Great stuff, guys. We're moving into the second part of the program today, and that's carbon farming and policy. If we look back in 2018, carbon farming was a term that not many people knew about. It was very vague. Perhaps people didn't know what was going on. But today, big leaders, world leaders like Joe Biden and Frans Timmermans are using carbon farming in practically every second sentence. Maybe that's too much, but they are using it. Marion, you visited Frans Timmermans, the commissioner, in last week, I think it was, in Brussels. And we're going to share a little video in a minute, but perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about the meeting with him and what you discussed.
Yeah, well, it was great to have this meeting and to have this opportunity to speak to Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans and to present our project to him. And the reason why we wanted this meeting is because we wrote a white paper.
Mm-hmm. There we go. Everybody download this white paper.
Yep. And in this white paper, we have described our most important learnings and our recommendations from the carbon farming project. And we wrote this white paper. It was finished in June, and we wanted to hand it over to present it to Mr. Frans Timmermans. So we applied for a meeting, and that took place last week. So, but our white paper was already ready in June, so we already sent it, of course, to his cabinet because he is preparing his EU carbon farming initiative.
Next week.
It will be presented next week. So with last week's meeting, we would be late. So we already sent the paper in June to his cabinet. And the meeting was great. He was especially interested in how it is for farmers to change to carbon farming, because in his policy, in his climate policy, carbon farming is very important. So that was his special interest.
Okay. Yeah, because last week we spoke to Diederik Samson, and he shared the importance of carbon farming. But back to your white paper, what are the most important recommendations that you give?
Well, it's 30 pages.
Yeah, but
so
tell them all, but the most important ones.
We have a long list of recommendations, but of course we had something like let's say 3 most important recommendations, which I would like to share. And the first one, very important, is what farmers mention, is that we need an integral, say, holistic policy framework in which all the different objectives that come together on the farm are dealt with in an integral way. So biodiversity, climate, water, etc. Now often these policies do not reinforce each other, but sometimes they even conflict. So we were really asking for a coherent policy, because that's what farmers need, long-term perspective and also flexibility to adjust it to their own specific farm situations. So that was the first recommendation, one. So the second was very simple, very clear. If we want to motivate many farmers to change to carbon farming, we need a lot of funding. We need a lot of funding, and we think the CAP, Common Agricultural Policy, is not enough. Well, and then the third one was knowledge, because then you heard it very clearly when Joris just in the round table, he was telling about why he is joining this project of carbon farming. That is because of knowledge. He wants to learn, he wants to be sure that he can still run his farm after 30 years. So he wants to be sure that his soil is up to it, and he thinks that carbon farming is the way to go. And that is what we hear from most farmers.
No, I think very important recommendations. I think it's a good moment now to go to the video of Mr. Timmermans.
Because he made a video for us.
So let's put on the video, and then we'll discuss policy with the panel coming up. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to have this opportunity to share a few thoughts with you on carbon farming. Carbon is the atom of life. It is the basis of our societies and our economies. Carbon is in our human DNA. half the weight of the food we eat is carbon. Since the Industrial Revolution, carbon has been the basis of our economic development. Carbon-based fossil fuels have powered our homes, factories and vehicles for more than a century. But as we know now, this very exploitation of fossil fuels has thrown the fragile natural balance of our planet off course, the balance on which all life on Earth depends. Our food systems bear part of the responsibility. Wetlands and peatlands around Europe have been drained because they have a high carbon content and are very fertile. This has released a lot of extra carbon into the atmosphere, contributing to the climate crisis. And that's just one example. Let's not forget that farmers are the first ones to feel the consequences of the climate crisis. At just 1.1 degree of temperature rise, droughts, floods, heat waves and plagues are multiplying. Climate change is a direct threat to the availability of food and the stability of supply. To tackle the climate crisis, we need long-term solutions across all sectors of the economy. The plans we put forward in the Fit for 55 package back in July put us on track. On track to reach climate neutrality in 2050, but we must ramp up emissions reductions and remove carbon from the atmosphere to get there. Carbon farming will help us meet our climate targets. It restores carbon cycles within ecosystems, and it enables our natural environment to take up more carbon. Carbon farming also provides a new business model for land managers. It allows us to reward farmers, foresters, and other land managers for taking care of nature. In the next years, we need to invest in re-wetting drained wetlands and peatlands so that they do what they are best at, which is store massive amounts of carbon and prove a home to many species. We also need to invest in agroforestry to give trees and shrubs a place on our agricultural lands. Doing all of this will be great news for climate and biodiversity. And with our carbon farming initiative, we aim to turn it into great news for farmers' incomes as well. To succeed, we need to make sure that there's funding for carbon farming. Under the new Common Agricultural Policy, member states can support carbon farming via the ECO schemes. The private sector is also increasingly prepared to finance carbon farming. Farmers and investors also need to know that the removals are real and that they actually have the desired effect. That is why next year the Commission will propose a certification system for carbon removals. It will make investments in carbon removals across the EU credible and attractive. Carbon farming is a necessary addition to our efforts to reach climate neutrality. It allows farmers, foresters, and other land managers to become true custodians of our natural environment and shepherds of our climate. With carbon farming, climate action becomes a business opportunity. Now we have to build trust, and the legal proposal will aim to do just that. I want to congratulate and thank you for paving the way. Your project shows that it can be done and gives inspiration to the others to follow. Thank you very much.
Well, fantastic. What a great support there from Commissioner Timmermans. So thank you. I don't know if you're watching, but thank you very much. We have now a wonderful panel here today, partly online and partly physically here in the studio. So I'd like to introduce them to you, and then we'll chat on about this important policy aspect. To my left, Chris Herbout, carbon farmer uit Temse, here close by. You're here from the Antwerp region.
Yes, it's only 15 miles.
Okay.
But there's a little bit of traffic problems, so...
But you're here, so we're happy to see you. To your left, we have Lucas Visek. Lucas is a member of the cabinet of Commissioner Timmermans. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Nice to have you here. Inge Ladinois. Inge, working for the Dutch government, for the Ministry of Agriculture from LNV. Welcome.
Thank you.
if it's all's going well on the technical front, we have Dr. Hans Paulsen, Director and Professor at the Thunen Institute for Organic Farming, and also partner of the Carbon Farming Project. Dr.
Yes,
Martin,
can you
yes?
hear me?
Fantastic, good to hear your voice. And all the way from France, Julien Viau, Head of the Carbon Market Unit, French Ministry of Ecological Transition. Are you there? Bonjour.
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you for inviting me.
Fantastic. Well, good to have you here. What we've decided to do is to give you, Mr. Viau, the floor for a short presentation, and then we will have the discussion here with the group. Okay?
Okay, thank you very much. So I will start with the first slide, and I will try to be quick because I have some of them. A number of them. So I don't know if it's, yes, thank you. So I'm Julien Viau, head of the Carbon Market Unit in the French Ministry of Ecological Transition. I will try to present it, briefly the label by carbon, which is the French carbon scheme, domestic carbon scheme that we have developed for the last three years. That deal with carbon farming, part of carbon farming, because we have also projects outside the agriculture and forest sectors. Next slide. So to come back, we have decided to create this scheme 3 years ago as a tool to help us achieve our objectives. So it was in the same spirit as the Vice President Timmermans said, to create a framework to help channel new funds to the farmers, to the forest owners when they choose to put in place climate friendly actions. And 3 years ago, what we have seen in this system is that we need to build trust between between finance and the actors. So that's why in France, we have chosen to do that with the help of the government. So it is a public scheme and it is not a private one. But it is also due to the French way of doing things that we are putting regulation and not sometimes waiting for the private sector to do their parts. Second slide, please. So on the principles, but I will be very fast. It is a credit carbon scheme. So like all other standards, we are the main issue is to calculate how much emission reduction we are doing and how much removals we can achieve, but in comparison to a reference scenario with all the question about the additionality of the project, additionality of the actions, and so on. So a large part of our work with the help of the experts is to better understand how we can apply those principles on specific projects and actions. So for us, we are doing that with the full picture of climate issues. So it's for all sectors and all greenhouse gases emissions, so not only carbon, and for emission reduction and also for removal of carbons. And we have chosen to do that even with scope 3, so the large spectrum of actions. So it's next slide. Yeah, I can move on that because it is the same idea is to say that we would like to have a broad view of what actions we can reward. Here it's just an illustration of how it works. So the state and the government is doing a lot of things for this scheme because we have the regulation first. Then we like in the private standard, we have a sector methodology. So each sectors or each type of actions, they are elaborating some methodology to precise how we calculate carbon, how we measure it, how we verify it, and so on. What are the sort of projects, the forms to use, and so on. And we are building those methodology with the help of stakeholders and experts to be sure that it is not a top-down methodology, but that use the expertise and the experience of the stakeholders. And actually of the farmers, for example, in France. Then when we have a methodology, we can apply projects, and the projects are recognized by the state with a third party auditor to make sure that the emission reduction are real in a way. And that's this system that is creating trust to ensure that there is funding from companies, from communities, from some also local authorities to fund those projects. Next slide. So just to explain how it works and what we can do. So we have now 11 methodology, 3 in forest, so to afforestation, reforestation. On agriculture, there is a huge engagement by the agriculture sector in France to develop the methodology in all areas. The 2 big ones that we have is one in livestock that I think you may know is Carbon Agri, and it is built on a project which was called Carbon Dairy previously to measure the emissions reduction in livestock. And there is a new one on crops, but we have also a methodology on orchards, on the reduction of inputs, on the edges, and so on. And we have started to have 2 new methodology outside the carbon farming sector, so in transport and buildings. Next slide, and just to illustrate the dynamic, because we have also other sectors with the viticulture, pig farming in agriculture. There are also other type of forest management practices that want to be included in the scheme. And we are also working now on natural areas like peatlands, mangrove, and seagrass, for example, and also other initiative in other sectors. Next slide. So just a snapshot on the actual project. It is changing almost weekly. So we have now 150 projects of forest, so around 230,000 tons of CO2 that will be labeled in 5 years. So we have just started the project, and here is just a forecast of how much carbon we plan to remove for the forest or to reduce with the farm. And we have one big agriculture project with 300 livestock farms in France that will, each farms, they have chosen, they put in place an action plan to reduce emission. And based on those action plans that have been made with the farmer and with an expert on the farm, they expect to reach this objective of 140,000 ton of CO2 in 5 years. So actions for all the parts of the farm. And we have 200 projects which are in the pipe, I should say, and mainly a new one on collective agriculture. So for this collective action movement is managed by France Carbon Agri, which is an association of livestock farmers who organize those collective projects. And the next one will include, I think, 500 farmers, and they will target mostly 500,000 tons of CO2 for the next 5 years. So we are building up our potential of emission reduction with this scheme. Next slide. So just for the project, but I will go fast, is just to show you that we are spreading around France and depending also on the region for the forest and agriculture. Next slide. On the outlook and the objectives, we would like to achieve 1 million ton of projects this year, and we want to achieve 2 million ton of projects next year. Mainly due to the dynamic in agriculture, because there is a huge engagement by farmers. And I've presented the result of the project on livestock, and we are awaiting big projects in crops, because there was a new methodology approved only in September, and now they are deploying those methodology on the farms. Next slide. And just to say, So I presented what we have done with the methodology, with the project, and now we are trying to also work on the demand side, the finance side of this scheme. So already more than 70% of the project they have found they have already agreed a finance with someone, so a company mainly. So we have big companies and corporate who want to buy carbon for their communications. We have also companies who prefer to invest in local projects near their factory, for example. And we also have like the Tour de France or the Olympic Games who wants to compensate and offset their emission, and they will look at the domestic project that we can offer. And also what is interesting is that this new economy is building up, and we have intermediaries, startups who are investing in this market by trying to develop projects, trying to sell the reduction of emissions, and so on. So there is a lot of hurdles, and it's not easy, but we are very confident to continue this development. And next slide. Just to say that we are already trying to improve our system by reviewing our own regulation. We are trying to support it with public communication of the ministry, and something that is important is that we will. There is a new point in the law, in French law, that the aviation company will have to offset their emission for the internal flight in France. So it's around 2 million tons of CO2 each year. And we try to channel this compensation to European projects. So we have French one, but also other projects in Europe. And that's why we think it's important that the Commission is publishing a new initiative on carbon farming and maybe a regulation on carbon removal certification, because it will help to structure this market at the European level. So maybe the last slide for me, sorry to have been maybe a little bit late. So what is important for us on this experience is that we need to have an inclusive process. So we have tried to include the stakeholders, the farmers, the experts, the institution, like you have done in your project carbon farming that you have presented here. Because in the end, we have to work with them, and we have to make sure that the mechanism is relevant for them and that they could engage easily with the mechanism. We have to work both on the demand and supply side, so develop the project, but also trying to look for finance and private finance, especially with TOS scheme. And for us, it is also very important to target a system where you are looking both at removals and emission reductions. It is very important for agriculture because sometimes one action could have a positive effect on removals, but a negative effect on emission reduction, and you could have also the opposite. So if you take all into account, you make sure that you are not doing something good on one side and bad on the other. And on farms, it's a complicated matter, and you should look at the system of production in general, and not just, for example, one part of the farm and one action in just one parcel. So thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Julien. Thank you very much. I'm going to have a few questions for you, but let's bring the panel on board. And I'd like to invite all of you at home to send in your questions through the chat linked to the policy aspect. But I'd like to start with Chris. You shortly introduce yourself as a local farmer here. Perhaps you can tell a little bit more about your farm, but particularly about why you got involved with the carbon farming project and what makes you a carbon farmer.
Well, actually, my wife and I have a farm in Temse with cows. We milk the cows, and the past few years, farmers were in the news with not a nice image because, well, we have an effect on the climate change. And I wanted to do something about that. So we tried to close the cycles at our farm. And basically a circular farm is quite the same as a carbon farming, because the same good practices come back in both principles. So that's why
it fits for
it
you.
was very accessible for us.
Yeah. Okay, now fantastic. I have a question regarding what you need with policy, but we'll get back to you in a minute. Lucas, we heard the Commissioner speak about what is necessary, what we need to do to make carbon farming a success in Europe. He was talking about funding and real carbon removal. What are you specifically, but you're going to do to achieve these two goals, not just from a Brussels perspective, but for all the EU member states? How would you look at that?
So I think those two things are really crucial. We're building a new business model. We're building a new market. And when you build a new market, you need two things. You need the credibility. So you need to build the trust. That's what we've been hearing throughout these two panels already. And for that, you need to be sure that first of all, that the removals which are happening are real. And you need to be sure that with the carbon credits that they produce hold the value that they are backing in those removals. And this is why I want to reiterate that this certification regulatory framework that the Commission is going to put forward next year is really important, because this will give the predictability both for farmers. They will know what practices to carry out, how to do the removals, which will ultimately help them economically, as we have heard. It's not just good for the climate; it's also good for the income and for the soil health.
The win-win-win we were talking about.
Exactly. People, planet, profit. But it's also going to be very good for the investors, because they will have the predictability of what that the value that they will be investing in is there. The second thing is that, as any market, it has to run on money, and for that, we're looking into this relatively unique situation where we're combining public funding, and we've heard about the possibility of eco schemes, which are going to be in place as of 2023 in the national plans implementing the Common Agricultural Policy, and member states have all the possibilities to put the carbon farming practices into the eco schemes now, before they submit their plans before the end of the year. But we're also looking into how to attract investors, private investors in this. In fact, this is already happening. There's so many pilot projects. We've just seen good examples from France. It is happening, and I believe that in order to attract private investors, we need to come back to the first point, and that's the credibility and the predictability of these removals. So with this, the EU will be actually the first in the world, if you like, to put forward a very credible certification framework for carbon removals.
I think the fact that the EU is putting their shoulders so much behind such an initiative will also make it much more credible for the investors, not just the technical side, but also the fact that we're behind it 100% of the...
Absolutely,
so
absolutely. That's exactly the point, yes.
Inge, sorry, I didn't introduce you, I think, in the right way, because there are many, many people working for the Dutch Ministry of Agriculture. So for everybody at home, Inge Ladinois is head of Unit Plant Agri-Chains at the Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality. Thank you again for joining us today, just to get that straight. She's responsible for soil management, climate adaptation, organic production, from there I know you very well, and for climate mitigation specifically. And I'm just very curious, maybe you can tell a little bit more how you are involved with carbon farming in Holland.
Yes, and thank you, Michael. It's very nice to be here and to hear all the stories, because I think there are so many nice experiences already. So let me tell you a bit about the Dutch policy. We have a national climate agreement from 2019. And in that agreement, a goal was set for 2030 to have 0.5 megaton of CO2, additional CO2 equivalents yearly stored. And from that ambition, we developed a large program, which is the national program Agricultural Soils. And in that, there is a large research project. We look at different measures farmers can take, how they can be combined. And I think we saw already a very nice example from Joris Wisse, who is applying already the knowledge that's being developed in that program. We also look at how farmers can be stimulated. We look at incentives that can be provided. And also we are looking at measuring and monitoring, and that seems sometimes easier than it is in reality, because it takes years to really see the results of projects, and it's sometimes pretty difficult to do the measurements correctly. And then a second pillar is on knowledge dissemination. Because a lot of results are being gained, and we have developed a program for knowledge dissemination directly to the farmers, but we are also providing training to agricultural advisors so that they can also give the right message to the farmers in the Netherlands. And you know, in different parts of the Netherlands, experiments and pilots are being executed. And then the third I would like to mention, and that is for more recent date, that we are looking at certification schemes, how that can be done. And we are also looking very much forward to the initiative of the European Commission, because I think that can help us a lot indeed. Yeah. So I think, you know, a lot is happening on the ground already in pilots and experiments. And we are looking now also forward how we can put that into Dutch national policies.
Yeah. And good to have the link with Europe. I think that's very, very important in this regard.
Yeah, so I think it's coming very nicely together. Yeah. A lot of projects that are taking off the ground locally, at national level and at European level. And I really think we have to work together in order to get this forward.
Absolutely. Again, the word win-win-win comes through constantly. So we'll... Dr. Hans-Martin Paulsen, Director and Professor at the Tunin Institute for Organic Farming and also partner of the Carbon Farming Project. Good afternoon, good Nachmittag. I have a specific question for you, not just regarding... I have actually two questions. It's your involvement in the Carbon Farming Project, but since we're particularly talking about policy, I'd like to also have your insights as to what people like Lucas and Inge and your counterparts in the new German government could do to help further develop this project.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon to all. So let me first give a short view on how I entered the project. So I was really enthusiastic with this topic because soil organic matter is the key for so many things, for soil fertility, even for biodiversity, flood protection, and food security at the end. And my role was to give scientific advice, and scientists always seek for sometimes uncomfortable truths. And that's a status I have at the moment. We have obviously have lots of co-benefits of climate farming. It's biodiversity. We can reduce fertilizer use. We can reduce nutrient losses from agriculture. We can create biodiversity networks. And when I think on, let's say, green strips on watersheds or flower strips, there's a high variety of measures, what could be the future of agriculture. And I see the future of agriculture and more regenerative carbon farming efforts. But on the other hand, it's a little bit difficult only to talk on soil organic carbon. And on carbon, we have to talk about the other climate gases as well in agriculture. This comes from nitrogen overflow in the fields. It comes from high livestock densities. It comes from drainage of peatland, Franz Timmermann mentioned already, and from destroying of grassland. And these are really big issues which needs a high transformation force in agriculture to save the climate in the next year. And we have to define clearly what the role of carbon farming, looking at the soil, can be. And you must be very clear about that. So my vote would be to concentrate on the real climate effects and to help the farmers to support this action by carbon farming measures they can take. And I think that could be a fruitful combination to have this really high engagement of local actors with carbon farming initiatives on the voluntary market. They trigger the development in agriculture and help to give solutions at least for the soil use in cropland and grassland we have. And then we need political programs which support these actions and measurements they can take. But I feel a little bit uncomfortable with the commercialization of this whole issue. So I wouldn't dare or wouldn't give the advice to farmers to sell or loan their resources to unknown people. So I'm really happy in this project with all these local initiatives, these motivation networks we created. And I see that really can create a movement of motivation. But maybe they can be treated separately from each other, even policies, so that we can have, let's say, can use a common agricultural policy to promote general attempts like changes of crop rotations, maybe additional payments for cover crops or other greening measures, and then combine it with primate initiatives. And that could be a fruitful combination, maybe.
Thank you.
As a start.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. Julien, good afternoon. Once again, thank you for your presentation. You're very much involved. You were talking about a huge engagement and also very ambitious goals for the coming year. But just reflecting back, what are the most important, let's say the 3 most important learnings for you that perhaps we can learn from what's happened in France?
Yes, so the first one, like I said, is to engage with stakeholders and use the expertise available, because when we have started with the scheme, we started after a pilot project in France. So there were 2 pilots, one on forests, where there were, in fact, already some scientific research and expertise with stakeholders to measure and try to look at how we can build this kind of scheme on forests. So that was on the forest side, and we used this expertise that was built on previous years to kickstart the initiative. And on the agriculture, it was in fact the same, because the Institute of Livestock, the French Institute of Livestock, IDEL, was working for a lot of years on a specific tool to measure the emissions of livestock, and they were using this tool with public funds from Europe. So there were 2 projects, one which was called Carbon Dairy, I think, and the other was beef, carbon beef, or maybe I changed the name. So there were previous projects where they have built this experience, and they use it we use it to kickstart those initiatives. And we have built the methodology with the farmers, with the representative of the farmers, to ensure that after that they can engage with the methodology, they can apply it, and so on. There were also an important point that we will have to discuss with the Commission, like all the regulation, is the equilibrium between the robustness of the MRV, so the capacity to measure and verify the emission, and how much it costs to do that. So yeah, it may be one of the tricky questions on this carbon farming issue is whether we are very robust on the measurement, but at which cost, and especially if we want to engage farmers at the local level and mid-farm farmers, and a lot of farmers, so not just the farmers with the most engagement and with the knowledge to do those actions. We have to find a balance, and that's what we try to do at the French level. So for now, it is working, but it is only hundreds of farmers who are engaging in the scheme, and not the whole French farm for now. So that may be one of the big points to tackle.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to go to the chat, but I have one quick question for Chris.
Yeah. You're the moderator.
Well, yeah, there you go. Chris, we're speaking now particularly regarding policies. What kind of policies would help you to continue what you're doing and maybe to increase even more, become even more carbon farming?
There's several aspects to carbon farming that are still not perfect for a farmer.
Let's share them.
Not only farmers are looking for new revenues, carbon farming is something that takes time. It takes time to prove, or before you see a difference in the soil, and when finally the increased soil fertility will fruit off for a farmer. By that time, you won't be able to sell carbon credits anymore. So a win-win situation sometimes is not enough to make it a good revenue model for a farmer. So
what would you need from people like Lucas or Inge?
Well,
what would help you?
Many things, but if just on the financial aspect, of course, one thing you said was that there will be eco schemes. Next year already there will be pre-eco schemes in the Flemish region. We have to make sure that they won't conflict, that private market opportunity won't conflict with this and tell us we won't pay for something if you are combining it with a measurement that is paid for by a government. So because I think it's necessary for farmers that we can combine several subsidies with a private opportunity. And then after a few years, we will be able to prove that, I hope we will be able to prove that there is more carbon in our soil. Of course, there are costs as well. We need to prove that we are doing well. So we will have need of soil analysis, taking it the first year when we start and taking it again after 3 or after 6 years. Of course, that's a cost. But it's a win-win situation as well, because it's not only a good practice for the farmer, but there's also fertilization advice combined with the soil analysis. So it's more costs for the farmer, but also benefits. So if there would be some support for the financial cost of this, it would be also helpful. And in Flemish region, we have a lot of actions per field, per plot, or per 2 hectares. There's a soil analysis. So if you want to do carbon farming on 100 hectares, you often will have 50 soil analysis. So this is really a cost. And
no, but it's good that you mentioned this, that we bring it into the practical side of things and don't just stick to the theoretical policy papers. So
for a farmer, there are practical reasons why or why not to do this.
Yeah, that's why I'm so glad that you're in this session as well. Lucas, do you want to react to that?
Sure, and thanks to Chris for keeping this real.
Yeah, exactly.
I think so. It really goes into the core of the discussion on where to get the money. I mean, there's clearly the money that comes as a reward for storing the carbon, and there's the money that's related to setting up the system and keeping it running. And then, of course, we will have a discussion about this. Clearly, this discussion is already taking place before the certification framework is going to be put into place. But personally, I would see an opportunity for the Common Agricultural Policy to help with, let's say, more the operating costs and the costs that are related to setting it up, but also the costs which are related to advisory services, because I think that is really crucial to help farmers to set it up and also to help and share the knowledge with other farmers. But to make it a little bit more complicated, I think what we also need is much better work on data, not just on soil data, but generally on data. And this is what the Commission put forward in the soil strategy, which was adopted last month, where we're trying to bring the different data sources from the satellites, from Copernicus, together with the land survey, which is called, by the way, Lucas, also together with the national data, so that the information is there and it is available to farmers. Another thing, to reply to what Chris was asking for, another thing that the soil strategy has put forward is a new initiative which is called Test Your Soil for Free.
Okay.
So that's well, it is what it says, literally on the tin. No need to explain that. Yeah. But let me just make one more point to make it even more complicated, just to show what also needs to be tackled, apart from the environmental integrity, which we have also mentioned and which is absolutely crucial in this context. But we also need to be sure that the value that is created with carbon farming, the value of sustainability, if you like, is transmitted to consumers, so that the consumers understand that the product they're buying is actually coming from specific production methods which are good for the climate and are good for the environment and are good for the farmer. And that's planned for the Commission's initiative on sustainability framework for food for 2023.
That's fantastic. I'm really glad you're bringing in the consumer here, because we all have to take responsibility for how our food is produced, and
yes,
not just that also with your wallet, so to speak. So we need to reward farmers that are doing the right things. Thanks for mentioning that. Marion, are we getting questions in the chat?
Yeah. There are some questions.
Because we have about 15 minutes left, so I want to give the floor.
And those questions were entered already at the start of this policy discussion. So some people are already waiting for a long time.
Okay, so I'm sorry, guys. Now
it's part of the game. I mean,
it's part of the game.
So
15 minutes.
But there is a question which was asked by more people, and I think it's a question to Lucas. So do we recognize that carbon farming is only a transition measure to bridge the gap until we have lowered our emissions? So can soils only hold a certain amount of carbon until they are saturated? So there are both two sides. One, the reduction of emissions, and then the other one, do soils get saturated? So is it transition?
I'm really glad for that question.
Yeah, I thought so.
Because this is absolutely crucial. I think it's actually the other way around. And this is what the impact assessment for the Fit for 55 package shows. Mitigation comes first. I could even stop my answer there, but I will not. Mitigation comes first. So we need to reduce. We have our commitment to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by 55% by 2030. That's a proposal of the Commission. Sorry, that's the Fit for 55 package is a proposal of the Commission, but the climate neutrality and the minus 55, that's in the law. So that's what we're going to. That's what we're going to do. The analysis also shows that that as we will be very drastically reducing greenhouse gas emissions, the importance of carbon removals will actually be growing. Because we will always need carbon, well, as far as we know from where we sit and stand now, but we will always need carbon even in the future, even when we reach climate neutrality for industrial processes, well, for producing food. So the moment to start this process is really now, so that we are prepared for the future. But I'll repeat it again, mitigation comes first. Carbon farming is not an alternative. It's not an option. I mean, it's not a choice for someone to say, I will either reduce my emissions or I will start removing carbon, I will offset. No, that's not the choice to be made.
No, very clear. Okay.
Yeah. And then a second question, maybe to Julien, because I know that in France there was a recent webinar on this issue of double counting. So the question is, how do we address this risk of double counting of sequestration outcomes? So once towards the climate target of companies, and then we have also climate targets as EU, nations, farmers.
Yeah.
So how to address this issue of double counting? Is it okay, Julien, to ask this question to you, or do you prefer?
Yes. No. It's a very easy question, in fact. No, because the Article 6 was approved during the COP26 last month. Sorry, and it is clear for us, at least, that if we have to apply corresponding adjustments, if we move the emission reduction from one party to another. So, for example, if we buy emission reduction from Africa to Europe, and we want to use it for our to achieve the objective of the EU NDC, but for now, the EU domestic objective should be met without the use of emission reduction from abroad. So we will not use the corresponding adjustments. And for us, what we are doing with the label bas carbone in France is a domestic scheme to help us achieve our own climate objectives. So we are just labeling emission reduction, and we are asking funders to help us achieve our climate objective. So they can claim that they contribute to this objective, but we will not apply a corresponding adjustment on those projects.
Okay, does that answer the question, Marion? Or do we I
think so for the moment. Okay. Maybe someone wants to add something to the double counting.
I would like to.
Question.
Yeah. So if you think on peatland protection, so that's an easy, or let's say easier to manage area. You can take them out of production and say, okay, I've prevent so many tons of carbon dioxide to emit, and I will bind additional thousands of kilograms of carbon dioxide here. And this could be sold even on the free market that I have here, because it's a long-term change in land use. But if you go on farms, it's not so easy, because so I don't know if you are keen on binding your management for the next 20, 30 years, Chris. So I think we have to deal the different options we have for climate mitigations in a different way. So maybe we can sell, let's say, obviously long-term measures or management options we can take and bring them on the national market or the international market, and keep the let's say engagement in arable land and agricultural management on a private voluntary market to let's say let the farmers work in a climate-friendly way and to trigger the development. That might be a good combination of the different activities we have, let's say on EU level, on state or international carbon market, and local engagement in climate-friendly management. So, and if it all ends well, we will find in the national climate inventories that all the local management changed the land use, and obviously and hopefully is able to change the carbon storage in the landscape. And that should be visible in the national reports we have. And these reports could be, let's say, the official report on that, what the voluntary initiatives have reached. And I think that's a kind of motivation we should give to the farmers. And that's, in my opinion, is a chance for the EU policy to promote the obvious measures farmers can take, which we know that and that will help, which we know will help the soil fertility and carbon sequestration in soils, but don't sell them too early.
Okay, thank you. Clear. Marion?
Yeah, maybe, Lucas, how do you see the question of double counting? Because I suppose that you've been thinking about this.
No, I think that's something that obviously needs to be that needs to be prevented. But let me pick up on one point that's been said on the different practices and also on the predictability, because we have to keep in mind that in carbon farming there will be more practices and different practices will have different life expectancy. To take one example that we have already heard about, re-wetting wetlands and peatlands, this is probably somewhere where you actually want to keep your investments in for quite a long time ahead. There is no business case in investing into this, in re-wetting wetland and peatland, and then drying it up 2 years later. That is not going to happen. But it is also quite an expensive investment. But then you will have other practices which are such as agroforestry or what you do on cropland, which are, let's say, less permanent. And what you want is to continue building up the soil carbon, but you also want to continue using that land whilst that carbon is building up. And I think that the different levels of permanence will also be reflected in the value of both of the removals and in the value of the carbon credits that are going to be linked to that.
Yeah, Inge, how do you see that? How do you respond to that?
Well, I think indeed the question of additionality and double counting is an issue we have to look into, and probably we don't have the answers all yet, but we have to look into it, because I think you said correctly that the system needs to be credible, and trust is very important in this one. And probably what can help is we are looking at trying to combine different funding mechanisms. And the eco schemes were already mentioned as a form of public funding. So how can private or other public funding sources add to that? And then probably, we can look at other benefits that carbon farming bring, because it's not only good for carbon storage, but also, and I think Frans Timmermans mentioned that already, it's also good for biodiversity. And it's also good for fertility of the soil, because then plants grow, grass grow, etc. And the water retention capacity in times of drought, that water is being kept in the ground and not spoiled away, like we have seen with the heavy rains that happened in Belgium, Netherlands and Germany this summer. So, there are a number of functions and benefits that come from good soil practices. And well, like I said, we don't have the answers yet, but I think we are on the right way to get the answers by testing things in practice, combining it with research results, testing data, and from that on we move forwards and get the answers.
Yeah, it's very important. And now we're particularly talking about carrot methods to entice farmers to become more carbon friendly. Perhaps also there's the stick method, whereby we say carbon unfriendly practices, how maybe we should stimulate those a little bit less in the future. But okay, that's perhaps a different discussion. We're talking today about the positiveness. With only 2 more minutes left, we could continue, I think, we will. But I'm going to close off the session with a big thank you to all 5 of you, and an applause from Antwerp. Thank you, Inge. Thank you. I think we learned a lot, Marion, today. I think we can look back to a very interesting session. And the fun part is that tomorrow we have 12 fantastic webinars to share with you again. So there's a lot to learn on this subject. I think the subject carbon farming will be up on the agenda for many, many years to come, which is a good thing. And just to come back to how we started this, it's fantastic to see that that farmers are seen as part of the solution, part of the solution, as opposed to part of the problem. And I think that's a very positive way to close. So I want to thank everybody at home for sharing your thoughts in your chat, for listening today. There's great information on the website, which I just threw my glass over, so perhaps it symbolizes the North Pole that is melting. But download these papers. There's a lot of great information on carbon farming, and you can always contact with us, with Marion and the carbon farming team. So many, many thanks, and hopefully we'll see you soon in real life. All the best. Bye-bye. Thanks.